Hi, this is Anil and welcome to the video tutorial for the Learning Lab on C++ programming. So in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to allocate the memory dynamically depending on the user input, and also we're going to learn how to allocate the arrays dynamically. Alright, let's begin. So the program that we're going to write in this tutorial is going to ask the user how many items you want to enter, and depending on that user's input, whatever the number he enters, we're gonna allocate the memory dynamically, and then we're gonna receive the input for that items from the user, and also we're gonna display that. So let's get started. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a pointer, and in this tutorial we're gonna receive the integer values from the user. If you guys want to receive any other values, you guys can write the program. I believe that all of you guys can do that right now. So it's gonna be int the pointer star pointer, and if you want, you guys can initialize this one to null pointer or null, any values. I'm gonna initialize this one to null. Alright, the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna ask the user how many items that he wants to enter. So it's gonna be cout how many items you are gonna enter. So end this line, and then we're gonna receive the input from the user. I don't know why always I missed it. Okay, now we're gonna receive the input from the user. So we need a variable to receive the input. So I'm gonna create a variable right now. It's gonna be int, and it's gonna be input. Alright, this input variable is gonna contain the number entered by the user. So we're gonna receive that. So it's gonna be cin and input. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna allocate the memory dynamically using the new keyword or the new operator. To do that, we need to write pointer. The address returned by the new will be stored in this pointer. So it's gonna be new, and we want to store integer values in the allocated memory. That's why it's gonna be int, and we want an array. That's why the square brackets, and between the square brackets we're gonna specify input. So let's say the user enters a value 3 here, then this new is going to allocate enough memory to store 3 integer values, or it's going to allocate the memory to store an array of type integers which has 3 elements. Alright, the next thing that we need to do is we need to receive the input from the user, and for that I'm going to create a temp or temporary variable. So I'm going to call it as temp, which is also of type integers. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to write the for loop. So it's going to be for, then the loop counter variable, let me call it as counter equal to 0, then counter is less than input, then counter plus plus. Now we're going to ask the user to enter the values. So I'm going to use cout enter the item, and we're going to refer counter and +1 because the counter is starting from 0. Next we're going to receive the value entered by the user, and we're going to store that in our temp variable. And now this temporary variable is going to contain the value entered by the user. The next thing that we need to do is we need to copy this value to the memory allocated by the new. And also you guys know how to access the arrays using the pointers. So if you guys don't know about it, please watch my video tutorial on it. And here in this case I'm gonna write pointer and plus counter, and I'm gonna group this, and we want to store the value in this temporary variable in the memory pointed by this pointer plus the counter value. So in the first iteration, so this pointer is going to contain the starting address of the array allocated or the memory allocated, and this counter is going to be 0. So the value will be stored in the first allocated place, and then this counter becomes 1. At that time, this pointer plus counter is going to point to the next location and the value will be stored there. And to store the value at that particular location, we need to use the value at operator with that, and it's gonna be temp. Okay, let me check it once again. Okay, let's add the end lines, just to make it pretty. Alright, now we have received the value entered by the user. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna print out the value entered by the user. To do that, we're gonna use the for loop again. So I'm gonna copy this and paste it in the next line, and before that for loop we're gonna say the items you have entered are, and let's end this line. Alright, and in this second for loop we're gonna change this in, and also I'm gonna delete that and copy this one, and I'm gonna place it right here, and I'm gonna delete this right now, and I'm gonna change this one to counter plus 1, then item is, then this reference to the pointer. Okay, now we have written the code to print the value stored in the allocated memory. The last thing that we need to do is we need to deallocate the allocated memory once we have done all these things. To do that, we need to use the delete operator and then the memory address. So here in this case, we are allocating the memory to store an array. That's why we need to specify to the delete operator. To do that, we're gonna write the square brackets first and then the pointer containing the starting address. That's it. I'm gonna save this one right now, and hopefully everything is alright. I'm gonna build and run this. Okay, we have some errors, and I'm gonna open up the logs. Okay, here I have missed the stream insertion operator, so don't make any mistakes like this. Okay, I'm gonna save this, I'm gonna build and run this again, and this time it works. Okay, how many items you're gonna enter? I'm gonna say 3 and hit the enter button. Enter the item 1, I'm gonna say 22. Enter the item 2, 55. Enter the item 3, 66. And it says the items you have entered are: first item is 22, second item is 55, and the third item is 66. So if I run this again, and this time if I enter, let's say 5, and the item 1 is going to be 12, 22, 55, 66, 88, then we get the same items back. So here we have used this new and delete keyword and allocated the memory dynamically to store the values entered by the user, and we allocated the memory depending on the user's requirement. So this is it, guys. This is about allocating an array or allocating the memory to store the values depending on the user's input. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like my Facebook page at facebook.com/learninglad, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.